Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 2024 Student Leadership Week. My name is Sahil, and I'm a graduate student studying regenerative medicine and the graduate student in the Office of Student Activities and Leadership. Before we begin, I'd like to extend my warm welcome to each and every one of you for being here on a Monday evening at this time. So thank you so much for being here. This week we have a very interesting lineup of speakers and discussions planned that aimed at inspiring and empowering each one of you to reach new heights in your leadership journey. So we'll hope that you'll find valuable insights and inspirations either during this session or the upcoming sessions we have in this week. So without any further ado, let's dive into our first speaker, Alan Novell. Let me change this. Okay. A brief background on Alan Novell. He's the CEO of a company called Entithic, a very noteworthy firm offering management consultancy and professional services. With over 3 decades of experience in the industry, he has an impressive leadership and which has proven to be successful in global Fortune 500 companies by promoting inclusive systems, fostering engaging cultures, and deploying equitable and value-generating programs. Prior to his current role as a CEO, he has held the position of Senior Vice President, Chief Equity and Community Impact Officer at the Metro Health System in Cleveland, Ohio. His role there was to devise and execute a community-centric, patient-focused strategy to foster healthcare equity and eliminate disparities in healthcare. He graduated from Cleveland State University and from Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management, where he currently is also an adjunct professor in the healthcare MBA program. So without any, so please help me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Alan Novell.
Been working for well over 30 years in a multitude of areas. So whether you are an undergrad, a grad student, whether you're an employee, or you just wanted to come and hang out for a little while, hopefully what I say will resonate with you in some way, shape, or form. My journey from a leadership perspective has been a very interesting one. I started out many, many years ago as a chemist working for the Sherwin-Williams Company. And I'm the son of a chemist. So my mom, who is approaching 90 years old, was a chemist back in the 60s and 70s. And this is pre-Me Too movement. This is during a time where there weren't that many women who were scientists. And literally, she had a very, very hard time. In fact, she caught hell. The things that my mom went through had an impact on her to this very day. And the only reason I'm standing in front of you is because of my mom. So she's in the hospital right now. As soon as we get done, I'm going back to check on her. But I wouldn't be standing up here if it wasn't for her. So with that being said, we're going to talk about leadership. And it's truly a journey. And I don't care, again, whether you're undergrad, grad student, if you are early in your career, every single one of you is a leader, because leadership doesn't have anything to do with the title. As Sahil mentioned, I'm a proud alum of the Weatherhead School of Management here at Case Western Reserve, and it's indeed an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to you and kick off this week's series of exciting conversations. Conversations about leadership. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And really over the course of my 30-plus year career, I've encountered literally thousands of leaders across the world. I've been blessed to have worked in over 50 countries. Little kid from Cleveland, 50 countries. I realize how blessed I am in that regard. So what we're going to look at this evening, if I can get this thing to work right, is we're going on a journey. This whole week is really a journey for you, a journey to explore what it means to be a leader. Because a leader doesn't have to have a title or some initials in the front or in the back of it. It's really about how you think and how you behave. So with this journey, it's going to span across multiple dimensions of diversity, inclusive leadership, resilience, and cultural humility. So my peers that you're going to hear from this week, and I encourage you to try to attend each session, because you're going to get a little nugget here, a little nugget there, and guess what? It all adds up to a container of chicken nuggets, okay? So it's food for you, food for thought, food for your own growth. This evening, we've come to really look at the very core of leadership. It's the art of guiding, inspiring, and empowering others toward a shared purpose. With that, I believe there are 3 pillars of outstanding leadership. Leadership awareness, what I refer to as the 4 Ps, and also authentic followership. So we're going to dive into all 3 of those. So those will be my talking points, if you will. And then I've got some takeaways, some calls to action for you, regardless of where you are in your career, be it academically or professionally. Let's look at leadership awareness. It's navigating the depths of self and others. What do we see in this picture? This is going to be a dialogue, so I need you all to say something, okay? What do you see in this picture? By show of hands, oh, go ahead.
It's a boat.
Okay, a boat.
The ocean, and there's a lot of waves.
A lot of waves. Does it look kind of scary?
Yeah.
Okay. By show of hands, how many would be excited to be on this boat? You would? You like roller coasters too, don't you? Yeah, see, I'm deathly afraid of roller coasters. So I've got 3 adult children and 5 grandsons. And I've been to Disney World, Cedar Point, and every time I try to take one for the team, if you will, and I regret it each time, say never again. But now I can play the old guy card. I'm a senior citizen, so there's no way I'm getting on a roller coaster. So to me, this scares me. This scares me. But this is an example of what it's like to be a leader. That journey that you go through, at the heart of exceptional leadership lies a profound sense of self-awareness. So the captain of this ship, trying to guide it through turbulent waters, but a skilled captain understands the capabilities and the limitations of the vessel. So can this vessel ride those waves out? And also the capabilities of the team, because it's not just the captain on board of this ship. So what are the roles? And if the waters were smooth, everybody could probably relax a little bit, but this is in rough waters. If you think about everything that you're hearing about on TV, in the news right now, you've got companies laying people off. You've got companies who are literally closing their doors. In fact, I know someone who thought they were going to get their paycheck on Friday, and the company closed on Thursday. So they never even got their final paycheck. So these are highly volatile times. So this captain has to understand the shifting tides and the currents of the sea. I know one time my wife and I went out to Put-in Bay with some friends. And on the way out, the waves were pretty smooth. But on the way back, it was dark. And we were hitting like 6-foot waves on Lake Erie. And Lake Erie can be kind of dangerous. I don't know if you've ever been out on Lake Erie, but it can be dangerous. It's not an ocean. But it's still, with that, I think it's the deepest part of Lake Erie is about 65 feet. But those waters can be rough. So every time we were heading towards back here in the back of the room, thinking we were heading that way, our boat kept drifting this way. So what should have been about a 35-minute trip from Put-in Bay back to the shore took us about an hour and a half in the dark, and it was very scary. So this image I can definitely relate to. as you can see, the volatility and the uncertainty in the workplace can feel somewhat overwhelming, just like this scene that you see here. Now, these are the top business challenges that we hear about in 2024. So if you just look at this word cloud, you see digitalization, competition, talent, sustainability, globalization. You see risk, you see supply chain, you see customers, you see disruption. That's a lot of stuff going on. So think about that storm and those choppy seas. Those are the challenges that leaders are facing right now. But we believe that there are ways to address these from a leadership perspective, and that leads me to the 4 Ps. So first off, leaders being self-aware, being aware of their surroundings, being aware of the dynamics that they're facing within their particular industry and within their organization. One of the things I didn't touch on that leadership awareness is the fact that we're now in this post-COVID world. You know, all the time you always heard about BC or AD. Well, now it's pre-COVID and post-COVID. And there are a lot of folks from ages 80 down to 18 who've literally walked away from their jobs to do something different. Gone are the days of getting your 25-year watch at a company. And because we now have 4 generations in the workplace, that awareness that leaders have to have, they have to understand that the motivations of each generation are going to be different. But let's go to the 4 Ps: passion, purpose, planning, and perseverance. First one, passion. That's that fire, that's that fervor. Passion truly kindles the flames of fervor and enthusiasm, and it propels you in the pursuit of excellence and innovation. So for each one of you in this room right now, think about, what are you passionate about? When I talked about the fact that there are people who are leaving their jobs now, they've lost their passion, or their passion lies somewhere else. So people are taking that pause and saying, let me find my passion. So my counsel to you is, again, whether you're an undergrad, whether you're in graduate school, whether you've already moved on and you're a leader in an organization, make sure that the work that you're doing is something you're passionate about. I believe if you're not passionate about it, that means God has something else for you to do, or whoever your higher power is. Think about this. We spend more time at work, and right now, for those of you who are in school, you're probably spending more time studying than you do with your friends, family, and loved ones. So make sure you're doing something that's worth it, something that you're passionate about. Next up, purpose. Leaders have to have purpose. So my question to any leader, whenever I encounter them, is, what's your why? You all might ask me, what's my why? And I had an opportunity to begin to share my story in terms of my personal why. Why am I up here speaking to you? Why am I an adjunct professor at Weatherhead? Why do I have my own company? My why is very much centered on the environment in which I was raised and the mistakes that I've made along the way, that I believe it's my moral obligation to share with you all so your road isn't as difficult. Granted, I mentioned I've been to over 50 countries, and that's great. All across Europe, all across Asia. A lot of things that a little bald-headed kid from Cleveland, Ohio doesn't have an opportunity to do. But that's the good side of things. There's also this tough side as well. So I'm very transparent when I speak to folks because I don't want them to make the same mistakes that I made. So I had leadership moments, leadership opportunities in my life where I could have gone in this direction or gone in this direction. Now, some folks might say, Alan, you shouldn't share what you're about to share. But I think at the end of the day, it's who I am. So anybody ever heard of Miami University in Oxford, Ohio? Okay. So I got a scholarship there coming out of high school. But I also got kicked out after a year and a half. because I didn't study. I didn't have any study skills. I just wanted to hang out. Anybody ever been to Miami? We partied a lot, okay? So I chose partying over my studies. So after a year and a half, I got kicked out. I didn't tell my mom I got kicked out. I told her I wanted to transfer. So then I transferred to the University of Akron, right down the road a little bit. They just made it to the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Different school, different location, came back up north a little bit. Similar behavior, similar actions. 2 years later, I got kicked out of there. To give you some context, my final semester at the University of Akron, my grade point average was 0.79. Somehow I earned that. I didn't even know you could get below a 1 point, but I did. Now, I'm not saying that to brag or boast, because quite frankly, it's pretty sad. But the reason I'm sharing that with you now is because wherever you are on your journey, as a human being, as a leader, you can always course correct. So, my purpose is to share my story. My purpose is to educate, to motivate, to inspire, to try to make this world a better place. So that's my purpose, that's my why. But you got to have a plan. So if we go back to me getting kicked out of those two schools, and it took another 9 years before I had the guts to go to another school and try to get reinstated. Had to come up with a plan. Because if a school would admit me, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to get the degree and then say, okay, all right, I'm done? Or do I have a plan for bigger and better things? So what I ended up doing was every year my company, so I did end up getting a job after I got kicked out of that second school. I was blessed to join the Sherwin-Williams organization as a chemist. They hired me as a chemist, but I was 18 credit hours away from getting my degree, but they took a chance on me. Now, mind you, they didn't know what my GPA was, but they took a flyer on me. So every year over the next 9 years, they asked me and said, you know, Alan, we need you to go back to school. We'll pay for it. But I never wanted to admit the reason why I was scared to try to go back. I said, well, first child, second child, third child, got married, bought a house. I was coming up with every excuse under the sun. Then one day they called my bluff and said, hey, we can't move you up in the organization anymore until you get your degree. So I had to put together a plan. So I went back to the University of Akron. The same dean that kicked me out was still there 9 years later. So by then I was bald, but he still recognized me. So we had a conversation. I told him, hey, I got my life together. I really want to do this. I'm just looking for that third and final opportunity. And he said, well, son, I'm glad you got your life together, but you still can't come back to the University of Akron. So I went out to my car and I just started crying like a baby. 31 years old, and my past was defining my future. Or at least that's the way I felt. So while I'm crying like a baby, one part of the brain was in planning mode. Okay, what do you do? Are you just going to give up or not? So a little voice, and I believe that was a divinely inspired voice, said, go to Cleveland State. So I drove up I-77 to Cleveland State, walked into the office, and there was an older woman on the other side of the counter. And she reminded me of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who had passed about 6 months earlier. And I just told her every single sin I'd ever committed in life. So I'm not Catholic, but I guess if I were Catholic, that's probably what you do in confessional. But I told her everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm just standing there crying, 31 years old, with 3 kids, by the way. can I please see the director of admissions? Because I need to see that director of admissions. So that's where perseverance comes into play. When that dean at the University of Akron told me, no, you can't come back, I could have given up at that point. But I allowed that voice in my head to say, go to Cleveland State. I went ahead and did it. I ended up meeting with the director of admissions, shared my story, and he said, we've got a special program at Cleveland State where we take 30 students a year, 30 non-traditional students, students like you. Apply, write an essay, and maybe we'll let you in. There was a committee of 6 people who would review your application and decide whether you should be admitted into the university. I was fortunate enough to be able to be admitted, and I graduated with a 3.97 from Cleveland State. So again, going back to my why, because I got an opportunity that so few people get, a third chance. So that's why I'm here before you today. So that perseverance is indicated in this slide. You see these 3 ladies up here. I don't know if you heard of the movie Hidden Figures. These are the real Hidden Figures. These 3 women, if it weren't for them, we would have never landed on the moon. This is long before the days of, a calculator. This is back in the days of using a slide rule. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. And there's a reason why these pictures are in black and white, because there was no color film back in those days either. Okay. But that perseverance is what you have to have. So if classes are tough right now, this semester, last semester, if this grind that you're on to achieve is tough, you got to keep fighting. You owe it to yourself. My thing is no regrets. And if you fail, fail forward, not backward. So, authentic followership. It's the pulse of leadership excellence. What truly sets outstanding leaders apart is their ability to nurture authentic followership. It's a dedication. It's a dedicated following that's founded on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. The reason I shared my story with you is because I only have a few minutes to develop an emotional connection with each of you. I refer to that as familiarity, comfort, and trust. So I got to lay it all out. I got to lay all my cards out on the table. So you realize that, well, yeah, he's a CEO of his own company. He's been a senior vice president in multiple organizations. He's traveled the world. Guess what? I ain't no different than anybody else in this room. Some people, when they get into leadership roles, act like they never had it rough, like they never made any mistakes. I ask each one of you, whenever you get to that precipice of your career, whenever you've reached that goal, don't forget where you came from. And always be willing to reach back to help somebody else. These leaders don't demand obedience. They lead by example. They don't lead based on fear or coercion. Again, they inspire loyalty through authenticity. If you look at the penguins here, even as little babies, ducklings, penguins, there's this role where everybody is coming together. These leaders operate with resonance, not dissonance. How many have ever heard of a resonant leader? Okay, if you have an opportunity, this is a plug for Case Western Reserve University Weatherhead School of Management. Dr. Richard Boyatzis, Dr. Ellen Van Oosten, Dr. Melvin Smith, take one of their courses. Reason why? You'll learn what a resonant leader is. A resonant leader breathes life into you. This is someone who will motivate, inspire you, not beat you over the head when you make a mistake. Those are the types of leaders that create a sense of loyalty. Those are the folks who you're willing to climb that mountain for. If you think about this, in this picture, it's cold outside. The lead penguin, the other penguins got to trust that penguin. Just because they speak a different language, because they do have their own way of communicating, doesn't mean that it's all that different from the way we communicate. They got to trust that this penguin's not going to lead them to harm or danger. That's an essential piece of leadership. So authenticity serves as a cornerstone of exceptional leadership. Genuine leaders lead with integrity, honesty, vulnerability, and they foster a culture of openness and trust within their organizations. I allow myself to be vulnerable with you. How many leaders, and I ask you this because I want you for the rest of your career, count on less than one hand how many leaders will be as transparent with you as I've been in these last 10, 15 minutes. Then send me an email, give me a call, let me know. In fact, I'll give you over the next 12 months, just see, all right? By no means am I perfect at all. Again, I'm no different than anybody else in this room. So, but to maintain that essence of authenticity, it's about embracing that vulnerability and cultivating trust. So there are a couple of folks that I want to highlight, and then we'll go into Q&A, who I think are exceptional leaders, people who jot their names down, Google search them, and you'll be able to see how they have done things differently. Some are still alive, some are deceased, but their stories are easily accessible if you just do a Google search. So first is Brené Brown. She's a remarkable leader who has embodied authenticity and vulnerability. She's a respected research professor and best-selling author. She's motivated countless individuals to embrace their authenticity and lead with bravery. She has a TED Talk. It's called The Strength of Vulnerability. And in that TED Talk, she delves into her personal journey of conquering shame and embracing vulnerability as a source of resilience. Her willingness to share her personal challenges and insecurities has deeply resonated with audiences worldwide, earning her admiration and reverence as a leader. So the secret formula that Brené has used is transparency. Understanding as a leader what you're good at and what you're not so good at. Because no one has it all. No one, once again, has it all. We all have our strengths and our opportunity areas. Are you willing to understand what those opportunity areas are? I don't call them weaknesses. I call them opportunity areas. But I firmly believe you leverage your strengths. All too often, I've seen leaders over my career who put an inordinate amount of time and energy in working on their opportunity areas, only to maybe get them to a baseline level. So understand what you're good at, understand what your strengths are, and leverage those in a good way, in an honest, respectful way. So you've got this vulnerability. So transparency plus vulnerability, that's what the hands and the heart represent. That's that vulnerability. But again, that equals trust. So what we've done in just this short time is I've been vulnerable and I've been transparent. So hopefully when we wrap up, well, actually before we wrap up, when we have our Q&A, you'll feel comfortable asking me questions. But here's the thing. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to make something up on the fly because I have to be my authentic self, and that's the way I lead. And those are the leaders that I respect, those who lead with authenticity and with integrity. So now let's look at bridging the gap. This is harnessing the collective brilliance for success. Within this room, there's so much diversity. And I'm not talking about what you look like, okay? We not only have diversity from a race, ethnicity, gender, perhaps physical or mental ability. I'm not saying disability, I'm saying physical or mental ability. But there's over 47 different characteristics of diversity. And I can guarantee you all of them are represented in this room. We'll do a little exercise. How many, by show of hands, consider themselves to be introverted? Would rather be behind the scenes? Okay, we got a couple. How many have no problem whatsoever being out in front? Would feel very comfortable joining me on stage? Okay? Is one right and another wrong? No. You need both. How many folks in the room, by show of hands, are analytical, like details, data? Okay? That's about half the room. How many don't like data at all? Okay. How many can make a decision with just 2 bits of information or would prefer to have 5 to 7 bits of information? The 2s, raise your hand. How about the 5s? Okay, that's the vast majority, okay. How many grew up in the city, by show of hands, in an urban area? How many grew up in a rural area? See, we could do this all day, every day. There's 47 different characteristics of diversity. None are more important than another. But here's the thing. What we get caught up with as human beings is what we see or what we think we see. I guarantee you, none of you thought when I got up here that I was someone who had been to 50 countries. That I was someone that got kicked out of 2 schools because I'd rather, party. But what we tend to do within 7 seconds of seeing one another is we make a decision. Within 7 seconds of me looking at you, I've kind of sized you up and you've sized me up. And we've tried to figure out, okay, what do we have in common? We have eyewear, okay? You like to smile, I like to smile. I can assume you like to have a good time. I like to have a good time. But the only way we know is if we engage in dialogue. And one of the benefits of having traveled to all these countries is I found out that the world ain't all that different. I want to share a story with you. I was in Shanghai in, I believe it was 2014. I took my mom on that trip with me, and we went to Shanghai in China, a couple other cities in China, large cities, but then we also went to Singapore on that trip. And we're literally walking down the street in Shanghai. And as my mom and I were walking, so this was 9 years ago, so my mom was 80 years old at the time. As we're walking down the street, just minding our own business to go to dinner, we saw 2 women approaching us. One who appeared to be far younger than the other. And we initially probably, I forgot your name in the back of the room. Dominic. Probably at that point, when we were as close as I am to Dominic right now, I noticed that they were both smiling as they were walking towards us. Now, all right, let's just be honest. Not a whole lot of folks in Shanghai that look like me. All right? So as they're smiling, my mom and I are smiling as well, but I'm wondering if they're smiling because, again, you don't see a whole lot of folks who are of African descent in China. Or so you would think. So as we continue to approach each other, the smiles get bigger, kind of like your smile. And what was so amazing was when we got to probably the distance between me and this microphone, we both stopped. Me and my mom stopped dead in our tracks. the two women stopped dead in their tracks. And we had this moment that defies any explanation. We found what I refer to as common ground. It just so happened that it was a woman and her mom, and it was me and my mom. And in that moment, with no words being spoken, we had this mutual respect and admiration for each other. Two children hanging out with their parents. So we nodded to each other, we smiled, no words were spoken, and we waved goodbye to each other, and we went our separate ways. But again, the world it's not all that different. People are not all that different. But in those 7 seconds, we make that judgment as to whether you're good or bad, whether you're intelligent or not, whether you're poor, whether you're rich. The only way we can find out about a person is to engage in dialogue. So I encourage you all to meet people, to interact with people who appear to be different from you. And I guarantee you, in less than 3 minutes of dialogue, you will find out you've got something in common with them. I guarantee it. Humanity has no borders. We put up those borders in our minds. So let's look at somebody who bridged the gap. Everybody know who this is? Steve Jobs. Unfortunately, Steve passed away some years ago, but let me tell you a little bit about Steve. He was an outstanding leader who grasped the potential of collaboration and collective brilliance. He's a co-founder of Apple. He was renowned for his visionary leadership and relentless pursuit of excellence. He assembled a team of gifted individuals. And this is where that bridging the gap piece comes into play. Because as a leader, Steve realized he didn't have all the answers. He had to surround himself with a team of folks, a team who brought various skill sets to make up for the areas of opportunity that he had. He empowered those folks to take unconventional thinking. We call that thinking outside the box. Taking those methods, taking calculated risks in order to ensure success. Last but not least, enduring influence. What's going to be your legacy? Many of you are still early in your career, and you're probably not thinking about what your legacy is going to be. You got a lot of years ahead of you. But just like I told you, you have to have passion, you have to have purpose, you have to have a plan, you have to have perseverance. Start thinking about, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to say about you? Does this guy look familiar? Nelson Mandela. Pretty much everybody knows who Nelson Mandela is. But just in case you don't, I'll share a couple of things about him. So Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa and truly a global symbol of peace and reconciliation. He took over the country of South Africa after they abolished apartheid. But before that, he was in prison for 27 years. Locked up. 27 years. Talk about resilience. Could have easily given up when he was locked up. But he loved his country so much, he loved his people so much. When they asked him to be president of South Africa, he accepted. He accepted the challenge. His legacy of leadership continues to motivate leaders worldwide to champion social justice, equity, and equality. But I think what's more important about Mr. Mandela was this heart, forgiveness. I don't think any of us wakes up in the morning trying to figure out what we can do to make your life miserable. But there may be some things that I do or say that might offend you, that might hurt your feelings. And real leaders are able to say, I'm sorry. They're able to ask for some grace. That's what real leaders are able to do. Because guess what? As human beings, we're all going to mess up at some point. But leaders that I respect, leaders that I hold in high regard, are able to admit their mistakes and say, I'm sorry. And then you have to be on the receiving end to give them that grace. And that's something that Mr. Mandela did oh so well. So we're going to wrap things up. We're going to go to Q&A. Call to action. I'm asking every single one of you, and we're going to make sure that you get these I will statements, because we're going to hold you accountable. Somehow I'm going to get your email addresses or phone numbers, and I'm going to send you a note and find out what your I will statements are. So first off, I'm asking you to commit to leading with integrity, empathy, and humility. Again, leadership doesn't have to have a title associated with it. Every human being is a leader in his, her, or their own way. Just question is, how are you going to do it? What kind of leader are you going to be? I'm asking you to commit to leading with integrity. So do what you say you're going to do. Make sure that your walk matches up with your talk. So lead with integrity. In terms of empathy, listen first. Don't allow those 7 seconds to cloud your judgment about somebody. Now, you may have never walked in my shoes and you may never will. But listen to my story. Human beings only require 4 things. You heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, these are Allen's 4 key things that human beings need. They want to feel safe. As students, you want to feel safe at the university. You want to feel safe in the classroom. You want to feel safe with your professors. You want to be heard because you have a point of view. You have an opinion. But not only do you want your professors and your peers and colleagues to hear you, you want them to understand you. So if they don't understand, ask some clarifying questions. So you want to feel safe, you want to feel heard, you want to feel understood, and at the end of the day, you want to feel valued. Every person wants to feel valued. Every single human being. So it's pretty simple. So in your role as a leader, think about it. Am I making sure that every person is safe around me? Are they being heard? Are they being understood? And am I showing them that I value them as a fellow human being? Next one, commit to leaving behind a legacy of positive change. You all are early in your career. I'm on the other side of things, okay? I'm on the back 9, so to speak. But you begin building that legacy now. Don't think that that comes once you've, gotten that 6-figure job or something like that. Each of you is building your legacy right this very minute. And then last but not least, commit to embracing the transformative potential of authentic leadership. Whoever you are right now, that's okay. You don't have to change. Just make sure that you're a good person. Make sure that you treat people with dignity and respect. Understand that you're no better than the next person. You just might be operating under a little bit more grace than they are right now. But every single one of us laughs. We cry. We like to have fun. It's as simple as that. So with that, I thank you. Feel free to go out to our, oops, I'm not allowed to stop, can I? I'm getting these signals like, okay, we're good? Thank you very much.
I have a question. So, being in that position, especially like it takes like a big mental toll on a person. How were you able to bounce back from that? And what inspired you and motivated you to pursue what you want to do?
So, for me, it was a combination of things. I realized how blessed I had been to have gotten that scholarship in the first place, I realized that over the course of those years, I had a lot of people who were my friends, who were family members, who never got a second chance, let alone a third chance. So for me, it was, I have to do this for myself, but I also have a responsibility to them and also to anybody who comes after me. So when I talk about the fact that I enjoy teaching, I enjoy doing this and speaking to you all, this is truly my calling. So I always knew that I had a calling, just didn't really know what it was. And then I realized that those adverse experiences that I had, some of which were self-inflicted, I made a choice not to study. But I realized that all of those added up to this very moment in time right now at 6:10 p.m. I had to go through those things in order to share my story with you. And if there's one thing that you take away from this talk, then I've done what I was supposed to. So I just knew I had to keep pushing.
Also, I have an additional question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Was there a time where you feel like you've giving up? Like, is there like a time where you've thought of that? How were you able to break out of that?
So the answer is yes. I think we all go through those moments where it's easy to say, wow, I'm tired. I just don't feel like doing this anymore. But I also believe that my personal motto, just so you all know, is aspire to inspire before you expire. Because if not now, when? So 15 minutes from now is not promised to me. Hopefully this doesn't happen, but I could walk right outside those doors and disappear for the rest of, God can take me home, okay? What I do in this moment is what makes the biggest difference. So in those moments when I feel like, wow, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore, I'm a very spiritual person. So when I get to the other side, I don't want to have to answer a question about an opportunity that I missed out on, an opportunity to help somebody else. So that's kind of what drives and motivates me, even in those times.
So after college, when you got accepted into Cleveland State, how did you go about executing your plan, setting up and executing your plan?
Okay. Great question. So when I got to Cleveland State, how did I set up and execute my plan? So what was different from when I was in school the first two times, by then I was married and I had a family and I had a full-time job. So the amount of time available to study, for instance, shrunk dramatically. What it required me to do was to develop some discipline that I didn't have before. I think this is my self-diagnosis that I probably have a little ADD, so it's easy for me to get distracted. So what I ended up having to do was literally go to school and then stay after school and study. Because if I went home, I was going to find 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different things to distract me. So I had to do that. I also had to, I love listening to music. I was a musician a long time ago. So not only would I study at school, I would put my headphones on and listen to music while I was studying. So I had to get comfortable with being by myself. I'm a natural extrovert. I get my energy from being around people. But I had to figure out a way to be okay with being by myself to study. The other thing I did was I made sure I developed strong relationships with each of my professors. And I let them know, and this is again being transparent and being vulnerable, hey, my attention span is short, okay? But I really want to be successful. I need you to coach me up, give me feedback, and give me the brutal, honest feedback. Don't just pat me on the head and say, oh, you're doing a great job. Help me figure out how I can improve. So those were some of the techniques that I used. And it's funny, when I asked you all how many people like structure versus a non-structured environment, trust me, I had structure for this talk, but once I got up here and I looked in your eyes, I flipped it completely. Because I felt a need to take a whole different direction, because there's somebody in this room, at least one person, that needed to hear that version of this talk. And I consider it to be a blessing because, and I've shared this with Sahil because we have a co-mentoring relationship. Anytime I get in front of an audience, I basically say a prayer first, and then I have no idea what I say once I get up here. So 15 minutes from now, I have no idea what I said, but I do know that it touched a couple somebodies in the room in a way to inspire and motivate them to reach higher.
My name is Malika Hamza. I am the third shift campus security supervisor.
Thank you. And what's your name back there? Yep.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm a first-year student, and I'm majoring in neuroscience.
Very good. Major in what? I didn't hear.
Neuroscience.
Neuroscience. Oh, you real smart. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
My name is Paris Martin, and I'm
Hi,
a
Paris.
first-year nursing student at Case.
Okay.
It's kind of like something that I'm dealing with right now, and I think that maybe you'd be able to help me out because I think it's something that you've experienced yourself.
Okay.
I know during your story when you were talking about your college experience, your first experience at the Miami University, I know you said that you didn't tell anybody what was happening. You just kind of said that you wanted to transfer.
Yeah.
And something that I experienced, and I always kind of feel guilty, telling people what's really going on, because I feel like sometimes it's my burden and I shouldn't burden anybody else with my problems. But looking back, do you wish that maybe you'd been more open with either your mom or friends or teachers, and how do you deal with that?
So first off, without getting too deep, you are ministering to me right this very moment. And I literally have chills running through me right now. I felt a sense of, so to give you a little context, whenever I would come home from Miami, in my neighborhood, and I grew up in a pretty unique environment. So I grew up in Wickliffe, Ohio, so about 18 miles east of here. In a small town, our neighborhood was pretty much all black and Italian, but I never experienced, and this is dead honest, and I'm going on 60 years old, I never experienced racism in Wickliffe. Now, when we went and played in East Lake, or went to West Geauga or any of those schools that were in the Chagrin Valley Conference, trust me, I got called all kind of names when I scored a touchdown because I played football and I also ran track. But in Wickliffe, I never had that experience. And what also was interesting was if I were competing in athletics at another school and I did get called something, I didn't even have to fight or retaliate because my brothers from Wickliffe who didn't look like me, who maybe had Italian last names, Polish last names, you name it, they filled the gap and they defended me. So when I started to fail, I felt as though I was letting my community down. Because every time I came home, the little kids in our neighborhood, ooh, Alan went to school and got a scholarship. And the scholarship wasn't for football, it's because he was smart. So I felt that I owed it to them, and I couldn't show that I was a screw up. And I'm glad I just said screw up because I would have said something else, but I caught myself in advance. But it was, so there was that level of shame. And then also, my mom, she and I have a very interesting relationship. I was supposed to be a doctor, and I'm not a doctor. So in her mind, I'm not successful. But she would always brag about me to other folks as well. So I got this burden as well of people having these really, really high expectations of me. And I literally tried to dumb myself down. So my behaviors were self-destructive because I didn't love me. So my message for you is make sure you love you. And excuse me, this thing may be videotaped, but I gotta say it like this. Don't give a damn about whether other people like you or love you. You gotta love yourself first. And that's what I didn't do. I wanted to be what I thought other people wanted me to be. So I started to surround myself with people who didn't lift me up. They wanted to bring me down. So I started hanging around with guys that you know, used drugs, sold drugs. So what did I do? I just got into that life as well. I hung out with, and it's funny because my mom always told me when I was a little kid, you're known by the company you keep. That is oh so true. So surround yourself with people that are gonna breathe life into you, who are not gonna tear you down, who are gonna say, okay, you made a mistake. Guess what? They did too. Ain't nobody perfect. If anybody tries to come across as though they never made a mistake before, they're lying to you. And you gotta forgive yourself because, like I said, fail forward. If you have a difficult time, if you stumble and fall, brush yourself off, get back up, and keep going. But keep that in your memory bank because you're gonna see somebody that's gonna do the exact same thing. Time may be different, circumstances may be different, and you have an opportunity then to pick them up and say, you know what, I've been there, done that. But look at me now.
My name is Scott, and I'm currently a freshman studying finance and computer science.
Hi, Scott.
And so I noticed that you mentioned your management consulting startup, an industry that I'm like really interested in right now and currently pursuing. So I was wondering how that like startup or company kind of like correlated with your mission or purpose and like why you decided to start it.
Excellent question. Excellent question. So this thing about leadership is, like I said, it's near and dear to my heart because I've literally seen leaders who sucked. I've seen leaders who have gotten on stage and flat out lied. And I'm sitting in the audience and I know they're lying. I've been in meetings where leaders have lied and I know what the real answer is and I couldn't say anything. I've seen leaders who, once they get to a leadership role, their ego takes over. I've seen narcissistic leaders. Now, that's all the bad stuff. I've also seen very good leaders who are inspiring. You know, I shared some figures, some people who everybody knows their names, but I know a lot of folks who you would never know their name, and you would never know that they were leaders because they might be sitting in the back of the room saying nothing. So for me, from a consulting perspective, I worked at Sherwin-Williams for 12 years, and then I joined a company called Anderson Consulting, which is now known as Accenture. So I did management consulting all over the country, both in the supply chain management area as well as organizational change management. So a lot of the people and the process stuff, not the technology side. So I know we got somebody that's in technology. Yeah, I'm not into the data piece, but I'll hire people who are good at that. So during that time, I ran across leaders at companies like DuPont, British Petroleum, Key Bank here in town, Texas Instruments. I worked on an Air Force base. So really traveled all over the globe. Royal Dutch Shell, Chevron, Texaco, a lot of petrochemical companies. So I would watch leaders and literally just watch how they move and see if they have followership and authentic followership. Those leaders that didn't have authentic followership, they might have people who, kind of followed behind them, but reluctantly. So all of these things over these 30 plus years of experiences got me to a point where, quite frankly, when I found out that my mom was ill last fall, I made a life decision. And I stepped out on faith and said, you know what? Between mom being sick and all of this stuff that I've seen in the corporate sector, and it's my belief that you all as young people, if you see leaders who lack integrity, who lack authenticity, they're modeling behaviors that you're going to think are necessary in order to be successful. Oh, I got to be just like them. I got to stand in front of the room and lie. Even though on the inside, I know that that's wrong. I got to fudge numbers. I got to do all of these dishonest things in order to be successful. And I don't want that to happen. So that's why I'm as transparent as I am. And that's why I decided to start my own firm. So I do diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. So our little thing about what we have in common, guess what? You had a DEI class. You didn't even know it. I do human resources consulting, talking about talent. I also do leadership development and executive coaching, and I do public speaking. So I've been blessed to be able to speak to an audience this size, up to an audience of about 10,000 people. But my thing is, I keep it real every single time. And if you like it, cool. If you don't, that's all right, I'll go somewhere else. So the consulting piece, you have your big consulting firms, and my advice to you would be, if you want to go in that area, get on with one of those big consulting firms for a little while, so you can develop the methodologies and the business acumen. But ultimately, I would probably, and it's up to you, I would probably then go to a smaller firm where you can, or start your own thing, where you can have an even bigger impact. Because what will end up happening in the larger firms, you'll get the discipline, you'll get the processes, the methodology, but you'll get caught up as just being a number. And you don't want to do that.
Thank you for all the good questions, and this is a little token of appreciation from the Office of SNL. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Let's give him a round of applause. All right,
If you
so
have other questions, I am going to stick around. So.
yeah, and also one thing about Ellen, he's a prominent figure on LinkedIn. So he has his own company. So Scott, you make sure that you email him when you're looking for a job. Well, like, he will hire you probably. Yeah. Make sure that you are connecting with folks that are in this room. Broaden your network, and just have a sense of belonging on this campus. So I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I know Monday evening, again, as I sort of alluded to, Monday evening, 5 to 7. Thank you for your 2 hour commitment.